Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Huria Amir. As students, we have done up till now the sensory system of sensory part of nervous system. Today we are going to start with that of the motor system. Now let's start with the introduction to the motor system. Well, what happens is that in the sensory information is integrated in the nervous system and causes appropriate motor responses. Motor responses begin in the spinal cord with relatively simple muscle reflexes extend into the brainstem with more complicated responses. Finally, extend to the cerebrum where the most complicated muscle skills they are controlled. There is no neuronal circuit in the brain that causes the specific to and fro movements of the legs that are required in walking. Instead, the circuits for these movements are in the cord, and the brain simply sends command signals to the spinal cord to set into motion the walking process. So we have to learn this, that the signals like to and fro movements, like walking, etc., they do lie over there simply in the spinal cord to set into motion the walking process. Now let's talk about the role of brain to give directions that control the sequential cord activities to promote turning movements when they are required to lean the body forward during acceleration, to change the movements from walking to jumping if needed, to monitor continuously and control equilibrium. Through analytical and command signals generated in the brain. Now, what is the organization of the spinal cord for motor functions? The cord gray matter is the integrative area for the cord reflexes. Almost always, the sensory posterior roots, they send sensory signals to the cord, and every sensory signal travels to two separate destinations. Now, one branch of the sensory nerve terminates over there in the gray matter of the cord and elicit the local cord reflexes and the other local effects. And the other branch is going to transmit signals to higher levels of central nervous system, to higher levels in the cord like suprasegmental reflexes, then to the brain stem, to the cerebral cortex, etc. So this is actually the organization of the spinal cord for motor functions. What is that? Whatever information that is entering the spinal cord, there are two branches. One is going to terminate over there, eliciting the local segmental cord reflexes and the local effects over there in the spinal cord. The other branch that is going to go to the upper higher levels over there in the central nervous system like brain stem, to the cerebral cortex, etc. Now each segment of the spinal cord consists of different types of neurons, which are like the sensory relay neurons, anterior motor neurons, interneurons. So these are actually the different type of neurons which are there present in each of the segment. Then we have the anterior motor neurons. In each segment of the anterior horns of the cord, gray matter has thousands of neurons, like 50 to 100% larger than most of the others, anterior motor neurons. They give rise to the nerve fibers that leave the cord by the anterior roots and directly innervate the skeletal muscle fibers. The neurons are of two types. They are alpha motor neurons, gamma motor neurons. You can see the different type of neurons, the anterior motor neurons, interneurons, etc. Now let's talk about the alpha motor neurons. The alpha motor neurons, they give rise to large type A fibers, large type A alpha motor nerve fibers, which are having the diameter of 14 micron meters. Now these fibers, they branch many times after they enter the muscle and innervate the large skeletal muscle fibers. Stimulation of a single alpha nerve fiber excites 3 to several hundred skeletal muscle fibers, collectively called the motor unit. You can see. Then we have the gamma motor neurons. About 1/2 of gamma motor neurons are located in the spinal cord anterior horns. These transmit impulses through much smaller type A gamma motor nerve fibers, about 5 micron meters in diameter, which go to small special skeletal muscle fibers called intrafusal fibers. They constitute the middle of the muscle spindle, helping to control the basic muscle tone. You can see A alpha fibers, A gamma fibers, their diameters, they have primary endings, they have secondary endings. Then we have the interneurons. The interneurons are present in all areas of the cord gray matter, dorsal horns, the anterior horns, and the intermediate areas between them. They are 30 times as numerous as the anterior motor neurons. They are small and highly excitable with spontaneous activity and capable of firing rapidly at 1500 per second. They interconnect with one another, and many of them also synapse directly with the anterior motor neurons. The interconnections among the interneurons and anterior motor neurons are responsible for most of the integrative functions of the spinal cord. So what is important is to learn that these small neurons, which are interneurons, they are present in all the areas of the cord gray matter in spinal cord, and they are 30 times as numerous as that of anterior motor neurons. They are small, highly excitable, having quite high speed of firing, and they interconnect one another, and many of them synapse directly with that of the anterior motor neurons. The interconnections among the interneurons and anterior motor neurons are actually responsible for most of the integrative functions of spinal cord. So they are very important regarding the integrative function of spinal cord. Only a few incoming signals, the incoming sensory signals from the spinal nerves or from the brain, terminate directly on the anterior motor neurons. Almost all these signals are transmitted first through interneurons, where they are appropriately processed. The corticospinal tract from the brain terminate almost entirely on spinal interneurons. The signals from this tract are combined with signals from other spinal tracts or spinal nerves, and finally they are going to converge on the anterior motor neurons to control muscle function. Now let's talk about the Renshaw cells. The Renshaw cells, they transmit inhibitory signals to surrounding motor neurons. Renshaw cells in the anterior horns of the spinal cord near the motor neurons are actually inhibitory cells. Now what happens is that immediately after the anterior motor neuron axon leaves the body of neuron, collateral branches from the axon pass to adjacent Renshaw cells. So, stimulation of each motor neuron inhibits adjacent motor neurons. This is the lateral inhibition. So this term, this definition of lateral inhibition, that is very important, that what is the stimulation of each motor neuron inhibiting the adjacent motor neurons is known as lateral inhibition. This effect is very important. This effect, that is the lateral inhibition effect, is very important in motor system. Why? Because the motor system uses this lateral inhibition to focus or sharpen its signals like the sensory system to allow unabated transmission of the primary signal in the desired direction while suppressing the tendency for signals to spread laterally. There is presence of multi-segmental connections from one spinal cord level to other levels, propriospinal fibers. More than half of all the nerve fibers which ascend and descend in the spinal cord, they are propriospinal fibers. These fibers run from one segment of the cord to another. Some of the branches transmit signals to only a segment or two, while others they transmit signals to many segments. As the sensory fibers enter the cord from the posterior cord roots, bifurcate and branch both up and down the spinal cord. These ascending and descending propriospinal fibers of the cord provide pathways for the multi-segmental reflexes, including reflexes that coordinate simultaneous movements in the forelimbs and hind limbs. Now, when we are talking about the when we are talking about the motor system, we should be knowing about the muscle sensory receptors. We'll continue this muscle sensory receptors in the next lecture, and thank you very much for today's introductory lecture regarding the motor system. Thank you very much, and Allah Hafiz. Stay blessed.